In May of 2024, the eyes of the motorsport world will be focused on California native Kyle Larson, who will be making his first attempt at the greatest spectacle in racing. Larson will try to compete in the 1100-mile challenge of the Indianapolis 500 and the Coca-Cola 600, otherwise known as the Memorial Day Double. Larson will be following in the footsteps of other racing legends who have tried to achieve the same thing, including Kurt Busch, who was the most recent to attempt it back in 2014. Tony Stewart did it twice in 1999 and 2001, finishing 6th at Indy and 3rd in Charlotte in 2001, while Robby Gordon also did the double too. The idea of the Memorial Day Double started back in 1994, when John Andretti, who was competing full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series at the time, announced a desire to compete in that year's Indianapolis 500. This wouldn't be new to John, however. He had competed for several years as an IndyCar driver and had raced in numerous marquee events through the late 1980s, including the Daytona 24 Hours, the 12 Hours of Sebring, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and the Bathurst 1000. This wasn't uncommon for most drivers during this time, and many racers in this era had been known to end up with a large resume of racing experience in vastly different categories. However, in 1993, John decided to take a different path that very few before him thought about, and as we near the 4th anniversary of his passing, I feel it is right that we remember this part of John's story. Before we get into it, I want to take a minute to shine a spotlight on Motorsport's podcast. Following John's passing in 2020, Marshall dedicated a part of his podcast into a series remembering Andretti's life. In that series, he interviews a team owner whom John drove for in the story, and as far as I'm aware, it is one of the only interviews regarding that adventure and where a lot of the dots in the story will be connected, and I highly recommend you sit down and listen to it to give it the credit it deserves. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel as we'll be ramping up our content for 2024 for both race coverage and historical story videos, and be sure to follow all the social media pages as well to keep up to date with the videos. Our story begins back in 1991. Baseball legend Jack Clark had recently signed a $9 million contract to play for the Boston Red Sox and decided he needed to do something in his spare time, one which he could turn into a career when he decided his playing days were over. Racing had always been a passion for him as long as he could remember back when he and his dad used to go to all the races across the LA metro area. He idolized Big Daddy Don Garlits growing up, so it only made sense that the drag racing would be where he would call his home away from home. That same year, Clark decided he would become a team owner in the NHRA, and he would buy a top-filled dragster and open a team in Texas. Having a 3-year contract worth 7 figures with one of baseball's most storied franchises would mean Jack wouldn't get to drive his car, so he decided to hire a driver and looked no further than another drag racing legend in Tom the Mongoose McEwen. Tom had not competed in the NHRA since 1987 and hadn't raced a dragster since 1972. McEwen would talk to the Los Angeles Times before the 1991 World Nationals and discuss the differences between then and now. "There is really no comparison between then and now," McEwen said. "I ran about 2:25 in 6.40 seconds when I beat Carl Olson at the Old Famoso Strip. Last week in a test session at Bakersfield, I did 2:76 in 5:05. That was big time fast, faster than I'd ever run in my life." 1991 would be a trying time for the Jack Clark racing team. The only highlight of the season for them was their lone win at Englishtown for the Summer Nationals. A race Jack himself wouldn't be able to attend due to his baseball commitments. A rain delay that forced the race into the night allowed Jack the chance to watch the race from the clubhouse.
A late afternoon thunderstorm had delayed the final round into total darkness, and Lori Johns up in smoke. But Tom McEwen, after an identical reaction time to Johns, streaked to a 5-flat 283-mile-an-hour victory, his first ever in a Top Fuel dragster, and it was the M&M boys, Meyer and McEwen, celebrating their Mobil 1 win.
And for car owner Jack Clark, this was a grand slam home run.
In 1982, the team would opt to swap the Mongoose for Mike Dunn. Dunn recorded the fastest speed in Top Fuel history at 297 miles an hour on a dragster with little to no sponsorship before Kenny Bernstein's iconic 300-mile-an-hour pass at Gainesville in the following event. Dunn ended the season 23rd in points. However, the headlines for Jack Clark would take place away from the racetrack as well as the ballpark. In August of 1992, Jack filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy with debt exceeding $6.5 million, but was exempt from having to pay the debt with his $1.6 million paycheck from a collusion payment lawsuit against various ball club owners over the mistreatment of free agents, as well as his $1.9 million salary payment from the Red Sox. In his bankruptcy filings, he listed his debts of almost $11.5 million, $1 million of which came from the drag racing team alone. In 1993, Jack would enter spring training season with doubts looming over his head, as written by LA Times writer Sean Horgan. The Red Sox were treating Clark just as they are treating left-hander Matt Young. as if he's a problem they wish would go away. And adding if you believe everything you've heard or read, Jack Clark should have buzzards circling his head. Later that day, the Red Sox waived Jack Clark. Montreal Expo signed Clark, but he never played a game for them and later retired. With the debt from his bankruptcy case growing and a lack of funding for his top fuel team, Jack was close to closing his doors as he felt his once hobby had started to become a job, and before the lawyers would allow Jack to return to the track, he needed to find himself a sponsor. He would find his oasis in the desert via Taco Bell, who opted to sign onto the car in mid-March of 1993, and when talking with media including Los Angeles Times writer Mike Penner, he stated that his sights were set on Larry Minor's McDonald's team and that the Burger Taco Wars were on. Once again though, Jack would have to step down from the driver role, as new sponsor Taco Bell stepped in and told Jack they wanted a big-time name behind the seat of the dragster, and on the podcast with Marshall Pruitt, Clark talked about how their sights ended up pointed towards John Andretti.
You know, the sponsor that we had wanted, like a famous driver. They wanted Tom Cruise or some surfer from LA, they wanted some big time name, but didn't really have the budget for that. And it just kind of put the word out there, and then he just kind of had his people reach out to us, and then we became a little bit of friends with Tony George at Indy. Yeah, and he mentioned John, and we kind of went through the channels and talked a little bit about it and see if he was interested in doing something that just went straight, that you didn't have to turn, so and he was interested in driving a lot of different types of vehicles.
During that podcast, Jack also mentioned the trials of getting John Andretti's top fuel license, as with the team's location in Texas, it allowed them to make the runs at a nearby Texas Motorplex to help John get up to speed with the challenges of driving the 290-mile-an-hour monster of drag racing.
I was basing in Texas, in Dallas, Texas, and so we tested out at the Motorplex, Texas Motorplex, and brought him out there, and he just was kind of a natural. It was just he's a race car driver, so it was all about his size and the weight, and taking a little bit of weight out of the car and everything else, because he was not a real big guy, and
sure,
he was so he was like the perfect guy for that, who liked to go fast, and got the hang of it right away. It didn't take us long to go make some laps in the top fuel car, and he was ready to go all the way to the finish line, pull parachutes and get the thing stopped and redo it again, and pull, have the crew go through the motor and everything, get it back up to the starting line, fire it back up, because he had to make 3 passes with 2 other top fuel drivers there, and I don't remember who the guys that were there. There were some other guys testing there to sign off on the license, so.
And he told me about it a couple years ago, that exactly as you mentioned, there's a very specific licensing process, and you do a burnout, then you go 60 feet or something, but in stages you kind of work your way up to it. And he mentioned I think he was only supposed to go a fairly short distance, and he just kept the sucker lit all the way down, and didn't make the folks at the NHRA too happy.
No, we were kind of sitting there going, okay, well, if you want to take it, half track or something like that, car's good to go, and parts are good, everything's fresh, to get the feel of it a little bit, just to feel the G-forces and the acceleration, then also feel the deceleration, when you get used to pulling the both chutes, not just one, so, but, he just, like I said, he's like, no, I feel good, man. If I feel it. So I was like, okay. I remember leaning down in the cockpit and said, well, if you feel good and you want to go a little bit further, 1,000 feet or whatever, go ahead and go for it, because, it seemed like what he wanted to do, he wasn't bothered by it. He had to get he had to get used to a little bit of not steering it as much, Yeah. And that takes a little bit just in your mind, because just driving cars and go-karts and NASCAR and IndyCars and everything, you're turning, and you don't do that with this. You have to really kind of bar your arm out and point it, and just try to keep it there. And you make going that fast, that quick with the engine behind you, you don't want to make any big turns because the back end will come around you, So he had to get a little used to that because he was trying to really drive it, like, hey, I'm the driver, I'm John Andretti, and I can drive this thing. It's like, well, you can, but it's not really that type of thing,
Sure.
So, because if something goes wrong with it, just tell them, just get out of it, save the parts. We're not a big budget team, so there's no use going down and just nuking the whole thing, trying to make it to the finish line,
Heading into Atlanta for the Southern Nationals, Andretti's daunting tasks finally started to set in. The day spent testing in preparation for the event had finally finished, and the realization of what he was about to do crossed his mind. In Andretti's autobiography Racer, written by Jade Gers, he talked about the morning warm-up session and when he realized he might have been over his head. I climbed in with the rear wheels jacked up off the ground, and they started the engine. I couldn't hear anything, and I certainly didn't know they initially started the car using an alcohol-based fuel. This thing doesn't seem that sporty, I thought. Pretty soon, Andretti said he felt like he was sitting in a Saturn V rocket. This thing was breathing fire, going chugga 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 like a hellbound train and rumbling every window in the neighborhood. When he climbed from the car, Andretti noticed a boy on a bicycle who had been watching the entire exercise. "So how long you been drag racing?" he asked. "I've never been," I answered. "So you've never done any drag racing, and you're going to drive that car?" he asked. "Yeah." "Huh," he said, pausing before he rode away. "Good luck." I'll never forget that kid. No wiser words were ever said. I was thinking the exact same thing.
Well, as announced, the Jack Clark Taco Bell Express debuts here in Atlanta, driven by IndyCar star John Andretti. And John, you've gone 508 in this car pretty quick. How did it feel compared to what you're used to?
Oh, I feel the lateral G's on an IndyCar are about the same as the acceleration on these, so the G-forces are, I feel very comfortable with. But I also found out the parachutes are the most important thing on these.
All right, Indy is coming up. That's still your first priority. What would happen with this car if you're involved there?
Well, I don't know. That's something that Jack Clark and Taco Bell and myself need to sit down and talk about. And I think we'll do that as the weekend progresses and see how it goes, and then just make the decision at the end.
You anxious to race somebody?
Absolutely. I'm tired of running by myself.
Good luck.
Thanks.
John Andretti's Sunday elimination qualified 12th. In round 1, he would be immediately thrown to the wolves as he would find himself racing none other than fellow Pennsylvania native and reigning top field champion Joe Amato qualified 5th. Both would leave almost identically off the line with Amato taking an early advantage. However, Joe's car would begin to give out a half track and John would drive past him to win the round with a 5:02 second time of 295 miles an hour.
Well, I didn't know if I won or not. I didn't see him, but you never know. I was just happy that I got down there, and I'm just really pleased. The Taco Bell crew has done a great job, so I'm really pleased.
They really have. And Joe Amato, he told you last night that he had a hard time staying in his own lane in IndyCar racing.
Yeah, I was worrying about him coming over and trying to squeeze me a little bit. That's what he said. If I was ahead of him, he was going to try and squeeze me out.
Good addition to the sport, though.
I think so. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
And boy, does Joe Amato handle defeat well. That's a class act.
In round 2, John would go head-to-head with the Mopar Jackster Tommy Johnson Jr. This race would see John start to find his footing as he would plant the car off the line and drive away from Tommy to a 4.926 second run at 299 miles an hour and a decisive victory to advance the rookie to his first semifinal round.
This is some way to start out the Top Fuel program, huh?
Yeah, we're very excited for Taco Bell and Taco Bell Express Top Fuel Drags. It was an exciting day. Our first time out. The crews performed tremendous. The driver, I'm just going to be thrilled with the way everybody's got the job done today.
Driver's earning his big bucks today. Big win for Jack Clark and the Taco Bell gang.
We see that race. Let's go to Steve. John Andretti said, did I win? Did I win? Yeah, you won everything but the starting line war. He got you by a couple of hundreds, and you drilled him with a 492, 298.
Well, the car's running great. It's making up for, I guess, my mistakes.
That wasn't a mistake. He leaves on everybody.
Well, I need to pick it up a bit if I'm going to make it through the semifinals or the finals. But, I'm ecstatic that we're making it this far. The Taco Bell team is just doing a great job, and we'll just keep plugging along until we have to go home.
Your cousin, Michael, having a tough year overseas, if he hears you win your first ever drag race, he's going to go nuts.
Well, he'll be happy for me, and he'll win a Formula One race this year yet, too.
I know he will. We all hope he does. Thanks.
In the semifinal round, John Andretti would be given lane choice and chose to run in the right lane, which he hadn't run in all day. His opponent would be none other than Mike Dunn, who had been in that seat before him, now racing for Dale Gwynn. and in almost a deja vu scenario from round 1, he would find himself with a slight advantage against Mike until his car began to slow towards the finish line. Mike Dunn would steal the victory, ending the Cinderella story for John Andretti and Jack Clark. Disappointed but holding his head high, John talked to the TNN reporters about his experience during the weekend.
A.J. Foyt once said, drivers drive cars, and you drove the heck out of this race, didn't you?
I'm really pleased. Taco Bell, Jack Clark car just ran wonderful. The guys did a great job. It's dry every time it comes down here, and I can't ask for anything more. Obviously we'd love to be in the finals, but it just gets tougher after every round.
I hope you had as much fun doing it as we did watching.
Well, I had a ball doing it. I wish I was around one more time, though.
Hey, they get greedy even at their first race.
Mike Dunn would go on to face Eddie Hill in the finals, who had won 2 of the previous events going into Atlanta. Eddie Hill would end up winning his 3rd event of the season and would win 3 more that year en route to his first and only NHRA Top Fuel Championship.
The Texas Terror took him to task today. Eddie Hill, congratulations. 3rd race this year. Great.
Oh, it feels so good, and we're first in the points now and everything. Set a track record here, loyalty of the meet. The Pennzoil team did an outstanding job today, fuzzing the gas. Wonderful.
You say this car is identical to the old car, but it's more consistent. It doesn't smoke the tires like the old car.
Well, part of that may be as this hair gets a little grayer, we may get a little smarter on the chin-up on the clutch deal, but the car is great.
All right, you've got a 487 to put into that computer in the final round.
Oh, excellent. That's great. Yeah, that's a good backup for that 485 track record, and we've had a lot of 480s this weekend.
You realize you've got a legitimate shot at a Winston Championship and all that money, 150 grand?
We really do. I can hardly believe it. The folks at Pennzoil did good hanging in there.
The Southern Nationals ended up being his best result in his time driving Top Fuel. John would come back and compete in the Mile High Nationals in Denver, where he would qualify 16th and lose in round 1 to Scott Coletta, then would fail to qualify at the US Nationals. These would be the only times he attempted drag racing because, as mentioned earlier, that in 1994 he would begin his full-time Cup Series career, which would see him focusing fully on that. He would score 2 wins between 1994 up until the midpoint of 2003 before he was let go by Penny Enterprises. Andretti would then drive for various part-time entries as well as a full-time Busch Series entry in 2007. John would also make his return to IndyCar, running mostly one-off attempts in Indianapolis 500 for various teams, including his cousin's teams in his last 3 attempts where he would reunite with Richard Petty. Outside of racing, John Andretti became an active member of the Central Indiana community. In 1997, he hosted an annual go-kart race for his charity, which he co-founded with local radio host Dave Wilson, and would go on to raise $4.8 million for Riley's Children's Hospital. With his former sponsor Window World, Andretti helped raise millions of dollars for the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. In 2017, John Andretti announced he had been diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, and in true John Andretti fashion, he turned his disease into an opportunity to help others by starting the Check It for Andretti movement. It was a call to action for people aged 50 or older to get colonoscopies to avoid the challenges he now faced. John would undergo various chemotherapy treatments to try and stop the spread of cancer, with his last treatment beginning on September 7th with a tweet he posted saying, "I began a new trial on Monday as the previous trial did not give us the results we had hoped for. In racing terms, we are changing the setup in an attempt to prove the car. I also have to make a quick pit stop with a surgical procedure on Friday. Please #check it for Andretti." On January 30th of 2020, at the age of 56, John Andretti passed away, and the Check It for Andretti movement would be turned into a foundation run mostly by John and his family. Ever since his passing, the #Check It for Andretti decals have adorned all the Andretti Autosport cars. There was an outpouring of messages, tributes, and memorial articles. There was a quote by the athletic writer Jeff Gluck that encapsulates how many felt about John Andretti. In John Andretti's tweets, interviews, or any conceivable message that would reach the public, it was always, "This is happening, but I'm fighting, and I want you to watch out for your own health with me in mind." You can applaud Andretti's on-track accomplishments and his unquestioned versatility as a racer, but when it comes to his lasting impact, it would be hard to argue anything was more important than what he did to help others, including the well-known race for Riley benefiting the famous Children's Hospital in Indianapolis. Those of us still fortunate to walk this earth after so much tragic news as of late should make sure to carry on Andretti's message, even if he's no longer here to do so.
If you were looking for John Andretti, the best place to find him was at a racetrack. He started karting at the age of 9 and in a sprint car by the time he was 20.
Are you going to use this as kind of a stepping stone toward bigger things in racing, maybe like Mike and Mario up in the Indy cars, or do you want to go any farther in racing?
Oh, sure, I want to go, hopefully all the way to the top.
By the age of 25, with his father Aldo at his side, he was there.
And the Gold Coast IndyCar Grand Prix goes to John Andretti.
His kart win came at Surfers Paradise in 1991, and at Indy, he ultimately ran in 12 Indy 500s, including races in 1991 and 92, where he ran against Mario and cousins Michael and Jeff.
I think we're always fighting to be better than the next one in the family, and that's something that keeps us all honest, as we say, where you just want to be better and better.
After doing double duty in 1994, racing in Indy and then Charlotte the same day, he may have ultimately found his most success in NASCAR, beating the likes of Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Gordon to win for the legendary Cale Yarborough at Daytona in 1997.
I'd like to thank RCA, Goodyear, Ford, and all the people that have been involved. I mean, Cale Yarborough, put a lot of faith in me.
2 years later, he won it for the great Richard Petty at Martinsville.
I told them boys, I said, we need to make a habit out of this.
But eventually, races became few and far between. He began to do a variety of appearances, including as an analyst for Trackside 6.
You've been great to us the entire weekend.
He also began something called the Race for Riley. Visits to Riley Hospital for Children meant so much, touched by the power of perseverance, followed by karting events, which raised big bucks over the many years.
This thing's getting bigger and bigger every year. I would imagine in a couple of years we'll have it at the Speedway. Is that right?
Well, the Speedway wanted us to come, but, we, not really. I mean...
But then came the devastating news in January of 2017. Stage 4 colon cancer. He said he never got checked, never had a colonoscopy, and all he could think about was his wife Nancy, daughters Olivia and Amelia, and son Jared.
Is this more difficult to watch in your family than it is for you to deal with this?
It's way harder to watch because it's unfair to them. I've said it several times. It's unfair to them that I'm even in this condition because this could have been prevented. Now, for me to go through it, it's my own fault because I didn't get checked. I didn't get screened soon enough.
Do you blame yourself?
I do.
You sit up
I
at
do.
night?
I do because I don't know why, but I do.
Just last year, John wrapping up his 23rd race for Riley and checks totaling around $550,000, all despite a number of clinical trials to battle his cancer.
You just got to keep going. The more you push, and even if it's hard to push, you got to just do it because it takes your mind off it. Like today, I'm having a great day.
John Andretti had plenty of great days, battling on and off the track. Without question, the spirit of an Andretti, every step of the way.
You can sit and mope and do all the things you want to do that you think that you would expect to do. None of that's happened to me. A lot of it's because of my family around me. They just, if you do, you're losing, and nobody in this family wants to lose.